Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hello, you beautiful podcast listeners. Thank you for joining us. You are listening to Rob and Rob, the show where you give us your, quite frankly, delightful questions, and we do our very best to answer them and provide some value. This format's been working well. We've done hundreds of them now, and let's make sure that format continues. And how can we all make sure that happens? Well, by you continuing to give us great questions. So let's remind you on how you can do that.
Yeah, you've got your phone with you right now, so just call 013 808 0035, 013 808 0035. Or if you prefer, you can go to propertyhub.net/ask. Either way, leave us a voicemail, and after some amount of time passes, your question will receive an answer on air, just like Fraser's is about to right now.
Hi, Rob and Rob. It's Fraser here. Just a question on property price predictions. I read an article in the FT saying that population is set to decline 2 decades earlier now in the UK in 2025. Bearing this in mind, do you think that's going to have a negative effect on property prices in the future if we have a falling population and excess supply? It'd be great to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Fraser. It's a really interesting one, and I've not seen the actual article that you're referring to, so I don't know what the population predictions were or what they are now, but I do have some general thoughts. The first is that population predictions are always wrong. If you look back at previous estimates of household formation over time, always way out. So probably not worth worrying about too much for that reason. Also, I'm making the assumption that the decline is not going to be a dramatic one. So if that's the case, I'd say that there's a very slim chance that it would have a negative effect on property prices. Why is that? Because if you take the official line on how many households are being formed and how many properties are being built, we're running short on house building by some number of hundreds of thousands per year. So if the population fell, then all that would do is reduce that imbalance. It wouldn't suddenly flip it. And even if that did happen, then I think you'd probably end up with just fewer homes being constructed on the margins rather than house builders churning out the same number and then watching the price of them go down and down and down because there's no demand for them. That just wouldn't make any sense. Personally, my view is that actually all of that matters less than it's claimed to matter, and the supply and demand balance is a relatively small factor in determining house prices when you compare it to other influences like interest rates, for example. So in my view, this would have even less of an impact than I've just said. But in any case, unless there is a strong reason to believe that the UK population is in terminal decline and is going to rapidly diminish by a meaningful percentage over a short space of time, this isn't something that I'd personally factor into my investment decisions.
Okay, Fraser, hope that was useful. Johnny, pressure's on me now to make sure I deliver for you. Let's listen to your question.
Hi, Rob and Rob, Johnny here. Just want to say a massive thank you for all the content you produce. It's been a massive help and helped me and my business partner go from thinking about it to buying 3 rentals, currently looking at doing our 4th. 2 of the ones we purchased were both back-to-brick refurbs done by ourselves as well. Just regards the next purchase, we're looking at buying a property that already has a tenant in situ, and really we just have to get advice with regards what we need to do to ensure we get all the stuff done properly for taking the tenant on, i.e. credit checks. Obviously they've been done by the current landlord. Whether we just use the ones they have, do we need to get some new ones? Also things like inventory, bits and pieces of that. Do we use the one the tenant did when they first let it out, or do we have to get our own? The second question really is also the rent is currently below market value and we need to increase it by about £60. Just wondering whether we go down the line of just doing the deal and then dealing with the rent increase afterwards, whether we get the current landlord to issue the rent increase now and then buy it regardless and have it in writing that it's going to be increased, or whether we get the rent increased by the current landlord now, wait till the contract's in place and he's paying the new rent before purchasing it. Any other information would be massively helpful. And once again, thanks for all your information and it'll be very helpful in the future. Cheers.
Johnny, this is why I love this show, because this is a great question, because while this helps you as an individual, there are so many people who would be willing to buy a property with a tenant in situ who won't know the answer to this as well. So let's help you and many others. So as this is your first rodeo, your first time of doing this transaction, I would lean on your letting agent. And if you don't have one, maybe consider, at least for the short term, getting one. Because a letting agent will guide you through this process. They'll help you with assessing the agreement they're already tied to, the current tenant. They'll also be able to comment on the referencing company. Is it a reputable one? And is it a company that you can trust? And therefore, trust the report. You've quite rightly pointed out you need to check the inventory. But to make sure you get the full list, go to a letting agent, go to more than one, and say, I'm looking at giving you this business. I need some help with transferring the property to you. What do you need to make it happen? And the great thing is you'll be able to assess those letting agents by how good of a job they do and how helpful they are, and give the best one the business. Obviously being upfront and let them know that you're speaking to a few and you're going to pick the best one. But rather than try and work through all this by yourself, I think this is a prime example of where working with experts is the way to go. Now, the second part of your question is interesting. It says you need to increase the rent by £60. Now, need is an interesting word. If it is need, then fair enough. And I'll come to the question. If it is need, then fair enough. But I just want to question a need. Is it a need or is it a want? Because if you want to raise it by £60, then maybe, depending on the tenant, you decide that you're not going to, because if they've been in that property for many, many years, you might want to keep them because they may continue to be in there for many, many years more. Maybe you increase it by £30 to meet them halfway. But let's just say for some reason, maybe it's to do with your mortgage or something else, you need to raise it by £60. Well, then to de-risk yourself, I would get the current landlord to raise it for you. Because if something goes wrong, if the tenant doesn't want to do it, the tenant hands their notice in, at least you know what was going to play out before you've committed to the investment. So I would get them to do it if they're able to. Of course, if they're locked into a tenancy agreement, they can't just move it up at any point in time. But I'm assuming that you know that and you are able to move the rent up. So I would get the current owner to do that for you rather than doing it on your terms. Plus, it looks like the current owner's doing it, not you. And so you don't take over the property and their first interaction with you is a rent rise. I know it is you, but the optics of it might look better if it's not you. But like I've said, if you don't need to do it, maybe after taking everything into consideration, you only raise it a little bit or not at all. But ultimately, Johnny, it will be your property and it is your choice. So good luck, Johnny. Hope the investment works out well. Do let us know how you get on.
Really good answer there. Great point about working with an agent to sort it out for you. Not something that would have occurred to me, but I think that's really good advice. Well, that's us done with Ask Rob and Rob this week, but the questions keep coming. They're piling up, and so we will be back to do it again this time next week. And of course, we'll be back on Thursday with the Property Podcast. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.